Natasha managed to leave work early today, and not because she had asked to, but because all the quarterly reports had finally been closed, because of which she had to stay late after the clock had crept past 7 o'clock in the evening, the time until which the working day officially lasted. And even though it was a long way to vacation, and tomorrow it was necessary to go to work again, but today Natasha felt so free. It was as if she was flying over the asphalt, and it didn't matter to her that it was drizzling rain, and she hadn't brought an umbrella from home in the morning, because the forecasts of the weather forecasters were the most favorable. But as Natalia would soon see, favorable forecasts often had nothing to do with reality. "Why are you smiling?" Natalia was asked glumly by her grandmother, with whom they were neighbors on the bus, holding on to the same handrail next to each other. "Are things going well in your life?" "Yes," Natasha replied, and her smile spread even wider, up to her ears. "It's just great." "Aha," hummed her grandmother and clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "And you don't hurry to rejoice, life can turn out in many ways?" "Oh, don't pay attention to her, girl," exclaimed a man sitting in the nearest seat. "Smile more often. At least on the beauty of others will admire." He laughed and playing with his eyebrows, added, "Married." "Married," Natalia laughed too, and raised her hand, on the finger of which shone a wedding ring. Finally, the bus stopped, and she jumped out of it. She breathed in the air, which was very fresh, as it is only after rain, and hurried home. There he was, already visible, and even the kitchen window could be seen. The light was on. Natasha had a box of Bird's milk cake in one hand. She decided to take it for no particular reason, just to treat herself and Boris to a tasty treat. And why not? Life is so beautiful. "Honey, I'm home," Natalia said loudly, coming into the hallway and putting the cake on the nightstand, hurried to take off her boots, because they were all dirty. Balancing on one foot, Natasha reached for the switch, and when the light flashed, she froze because in the picture of the surrounding world, she found something unusual and wrong. In the middle of the corridor lay a pair of women's boots, stylish cherry-colored stiletto heels. Only Natasha didn't wear them. Neither did her mother-in-law, who sometimes dropped by uninvited. And she couldn't start wearing them all of a sudden, because she couldn't stand heels. And then Natasha heard a sound. Maybe the TV was on and her husband was watching, but her heart had already gone somewhere, past her heels, and it seemed to have gone straight to Tartarus, as Natalia could swear on anything that it was not the voice of a television, but of a living person. "Boris," she called softly. The voice went silent. There was a rustle and an anxious whisper in the room that served as their living room and bedroom. If the sofa was unfolded, Natasha moved forward like a wound-up doll. "Open the door. Look in front of her." The picture she saw in all its gruesome detail downloaded into her brain, and Natasha swayed sideways. Her breath caught. Black dots flashed before her eyes. The weakness lasted only a few moments, but it seemed like an eternity. No, this can't be happening. But what he saw was true. Disgusting. Nauseating. The girl with whom Boris had cheated was hurriedly tidying herself up and babbling something about how it was an accident, and she didn't know he was married. Natasha looked up at the wall where the painting hung. It had been ordered after the wedding, which had been 3 years ago. Natasha's mother had insisted on the painting, and at first it had seemed tasteless to her, but then she got used to it, and even began to consider it a cute interior decoration. The painting was not painted, but printed to imitate oil paint, and the source was one of Natasha and Boris's wedding photos. So, well, it was hard not to pay attention to it. So the girl, it was clear at once, was lying. Only Natasha wasn't angry with her. It seemed to her that she had forgotten how to feel anything. And inside her there was only a festering blackness, growing and swallowing up everything like a black hole. Natasha shook her head. What was Boris saying? What could explain everything? It would be funny there was no more stereotypical phrase to use in such a situation. Except Natasha wasn't amused at all. She opened and then closed her mouth, and then, turning around, went or rather waddled to the bathroom. Such a simple solution, and known since her school days, when her mother chased her for failing at tests to lock herself in, turn on the water at full power, and let her tears flow, crying as hard as she could until it got easier. Only now, as Natasha did not roar, but it did not get easier. The tears had run out. Boris seemed to be scratching at the door, demanding to come out and talk, but she didn't react. The bathroom was filled with steam. Natasha opened the hot water, and she turned on the faucet. Then she opened the door because it was stuffy. Sorry. And went out into the hallway. "Go away," said to her husband, passing him, and went to the kitchen. "Should I make myself some tea? And I forgot to put the cake in the fridge." Natasha was surprised herself. What tea and what cake, if you have just been cheated on? But for some reason it was these mundane, everyday thoughts that helped to keep from crying again, squeezing out the remnants of tears. "I'm going to my mom's," Boris said, rustling down the hall. "You forgot the cake here," he added before disappearing. Natasha, sighing, took the cake into the kitchen, removed the lid, and sitting down at the table, scooped out a buttery flower with a spoon and sent it to her mouth. No flavor at all. That same day, her mother-in-law tried to call her 20 times. Natasha didn't pick up the phone because it was clear whose side she was on. Then her mother called, and Natasha laughed nervously and hysterically after her first words. Because, well, what a circus Boris had started. Not only did he tell his mother everything, and she tried to act as a lightning rod between them, but in addition his mother-in-law called Natalia's mother, and, having stated what had happened, of course, from a favorable position for her and her son, tried to attract another party to solve this issue. But she miscalculated. "And I told you," Tamara almost shouted. "It was necessary that he credit for the car alone to pay. You still do not drive it. How can you now determine that yours is more than his investment?" "Mom," Natasha sighed. "My husband cheated on me. Do you care how we'll divide the car? I care that my daughter is an idiot. Men are unreliable. I should have known. I mean, I should have made a bed. Well, you know what I mean. Have you talked to him yet?" "No." Natasha rubbed the bridge of her nose. Her head was starting to hurt terribly. "Mom, can we talk later? I don't feel well. I'm going to lie down." The next morning, while Natasha was getting ready and getting to work as well as the whole working day, she felt nauseous and generally was not feeling well. It must be the flu, she thought, and then began to suspect the cake, which maybe wasn't fresh. But when she got home in the evening and checked the label on the box, Natasha was convinced that it was quite fresh. And she felt better. There were a few missed calls from her husband and another from her mother, but Natasha decided that it could wait until tomorrow. But in the morning she felt bad again, and one thought closed in her head that made Natasha feel cold. What if she was pregnant? Perhaps, just not that, said the young woman to her reflection, going out to the pharmacy to get a pregnancy test. And the test was positive. And then Natasha, sitting on the bathroom floor, cried a second time. Because firstly, she was not planning a pregnancy in principle. And secondly, there could hardly be a worse time for her than now. After her husband's betrayal, she desperately wanted to talk to someone about it. But who? Her mom. Natasha wrinkled her nose as if from a toothache, imagining what a stream of not everything pleasant, including a waterfall of reproaches for indiscretion, she would hear. Yesterday she hadn't wanted to talk to anyone at all. But now Natasha dialed the number of Oksana, a friend she'd known since high school. "Hi," Natasha said. "Do you have a minute?" As soon as Natalia told her that her husband had cheated on her, Oksana told her to end the call and come to her immediately, because this was not a telephone conversation, and it was necessary to go into everything seriously. "I can and I to you, theoretically," said Oksana in the background, ringing dishes. She had a habit of communicating on speakerphone while doing household chores. "But I've got the dough for the pies coming up. And pies, by the way, are a great remedy for depression." "Maybe I'm not depressed," Natasha muttered. "No, friend. With a life like this, you definitely already are. Come on, get ready and come to me right away," Oksana commanded, and Natasha started to pack. She was still nauseous, but sitting at home alone was even worse. "You look like a canvas," Oksana commented on her appearance, sitting down in her kitchen. She held out a cup of fragrant tea green, plus a bouquet of different herbs and honey. "I know, because I'm pregnant," Natasha snorted. Oksana choked on her tea. "What? Now?" "Well, if he had cheated on me earlier," Natasha grinned wryly, "I would have refrained from it somehow. I just don't know what to do now. It's like being trapped. Divorce, alimony, and new haircut. Cut him out of joint photos, put a spell on him so that he wouldn't be happy, and also find a new normal man." Oksana blurted out in one breath with such a positive, awful expression on her face that Natasha laughed against her will. "I just don't know which of these things scares me the most. Believe me, everything will be all right." Oksana put down her tea and went to the second kitchen table to make pies. The main thing was to act decisively now, ruthlessly towards him and carefully towards herself. "How are the grandparents? Are they picking out names yet?" "If you mean mine, I haven't even told them yet," Natasha sighed. "I won't let my mother-in-law near my baby at all." "Shall I help you with the pies?" "Come on," agreed Oksana. "And let's talk about something calm. Well, at least relatively. How was work? How is the trainee, about whom you told me, coping? What about bonuses this year? What about New Year's Eve vacation? Are they gonna make me work on the 31st again? By the way, I've been looking at this coat. I thought I was going to update my closet only in spring, but I'm afraid that my sorrel-colored beauty will not wait for me. I think to take from a stash or better from a credit card. A couple of hours flew by unnoticed while talking about everything in the world, and making cakes and then drinking tea with them. Oops, Oksana said suddenly when she got a message on her phone. What an oddball human being. What happened? Natasha asked. It's my brother, Igor. My cousin. Oksana shook her head. He was passing through town, and in fact, he wrote that he would be there on the 21st. But now, you see, it turns out that he wrote it wrong in the message, and it's actually on the 12th. And it's today. What a jerk, never without surprises. Oksana fussed, but immediately sat back down and waved her hand. And what is it? Here, tell me how it turns out the 7th year alone already live. A long time ago it seems from parents moved out, and as someone is going to visit. So I have a panic urgently need to clean up. And that is inconvenient, and what people will say. If you have not washed the floor just now, and not wiped all the dust, and not arranged everything neatly. Did you do it for me too? No, Oksana waved her hand. You're my best friend, so it's easy to be with you, and I can even pig out with you. And you know Igor will survive somehow, too. I'll probably go. Where to? And the pies, they've just put raspberry jam on them. No, stay. Will it be comfortable? Natasha thought about it. A relative is coming tired, probably from the road, and here I am, I don't know who. If my brother can't tolerate my best friend, then let him go to a hotel, Oksana snorted. And then she added with a sly squint. He is a bachelor, and you, it turns out, a maid of honor. Oh, come on, Natasha laughed. What are you talking about? You'll say the same thing. Who needs me now? I'll be a single mother with a child. I'll be a single mother. You obviously underestimate yourself, winked Oksana. Oh, what's that smell? I think the pies are burning. The baked goods were saved, and an hour later the doorbell rang. Natasha, by the way, once again wanted to leave, but Oksana just grabbed her hand and said that she just wanted to introduce her to Igor. What's the big deal? Nothing wrong with that, right? I had to give in and stay. Igor turned out to be taller than Boris, a handsome brown-haired man with gray eyes. He had a beautiful voice and generally made the most pleasant impression. And when he said hello to Natasha and smiled, she felt her cheeks blush. Probably, Natasha decided, it was something hormonal because of the pregnancy, and her body was reacting in such a silly way. Naturally, it was impossible to leave immediately, and she had to sit down at the table to drink tea again. Natasha did not hide how skillfully Oksana manipulates her brother, pushing him to talk more about himself. 32 years old, a dentist by profession and works in a private clinic. No bad habits, a fan of winter sports, can cook well, lives in a separate and own apartment in the city for 4 days, and plans to visit acquaintances, and a little walk here and there. Natasha has tomorrow off, Oksana said, with the most innocent expression on her face. And she knows the city very well. So, maybe you can go for a walk together. You didn't have any special plans for tomorrow, did you? Oksana turned to Natasha, ignoring the fact that she was kicking her under the table. Stop it. What are you doing? At first, Natasha had decided that she wasn't going to participate in all this, in the sense that she wasn't going to spend time with Igor. But it turned out the other way around. The thing was that Natasha's mother-in-law came to her house. To be more precise, she tried to come. They were talking through the door, and probably the neighbors heard it too. But Natasha didn't care. If your son has something to say, he should say it himself, Natasha said. You're not answering the phone, said the mother-in-law. That's because I don't want to see or hear from him. Natasha shouted and even kicked the door. The mother-in-law on the other side called her crazy. He has a girl to talk to. Let him go to her. The negotiations that took place in the early morning changed Natasha's choice. She changed her mind about canceling the meeting with Igor, and they had a wonderful day, walking around the city, had lunch in a nice little restaurant, and actually, Natasha had money to pay for herself. But Igor insisted on taking the expenses on himself. I'm leaving soon, he said as he walked her home. But I may be back soon. Lucky you, Natasha smiled. What, a second vacation? No, Igor smiled back, and Natasha felt awkward, as if she had let herself go too far. And it wasn't a vacation, by the way, but a long weekend. But I'm thinking of moving here permanently. The city's bigger, there's good job opportunities. I'll sell my apartment and buy here. Do you think that's a good idea? I don't know. Natasha looked away, swallowing hard. How can I advise you? I don't know your plans for your life, what your priorities are, and in general. They met once more, and then Igor flew away, and Natasha breathed a sigh of peace. Because this man was acting strangely somehow, probably. She thought it's all about pregnancy. She thought it's the hormones hitting the brain, and he's acting strangely. Soon Natasha made up her mind and went to the doctor. She still had hope that the test showed the wrong result, but the pregnancy was confirmed. Then Natasha decided to tell her mother everything, and the reaction was pretty much what she expected. Cheating happens, Tamara said sternly, and if all women divorced because of such cases, there would be no complete families at all. What are you saying? Natasha sighed. She was sitting at the table, warming her fingers, chilled from the street and for some reason shivering a little against a cup of tea. Her mother liked herbs too, but in her tea they weren't as tasty as Oksana could make them. They were always bitter. There are normal men. It's just that I got such a morally defective one. Just because Boris cheated, Tamara raised her index finger importantly, does not mean that he will be a bad father. You have to give him a second chance. Give who a second chance? The future child. And how do you want the line of suitors to you so lined up? You wish. Modern men, they're practical, and if you think. I don't think anything. Mother, Natasha exclaimed. I'm tired of thinking and feeling anything at all. I just want to live quietly, normally. Do I really want so much? Everything in life is never calm and simple. Toma shook her head disapprovingly. Come on. It's time to make peace and live not only for yourself. It's time, daughter. She was not at all surprised when Boris, who had learned that they were going to have a child, involved his mother in the negotiations about the family reunion. Her mother-in-law also behaved predictably. She began to talk about the importance of a complete family, about how her son had always dreamed of becoming a father, and how happy she was to become a grandmother. Natasha listened to this, and she felt sick at the thought that tomorrow her ex-husband would come home, and everything would go on as before. And then, when he did come home, hands off! Natasha almost shouted when Boris, sneaking up, she was frying eggs at that moment, tried to touch her stomach. What are you doing? He rounded his eyes. I just wanted to check how he is there. The doctor is checking how he's doing. Natasha clenched the wooden spatula so hard that her fingers turned white. And you. And I'm the father. Boris answered with a sort of indignation, sticking out his chest. All right, let's not quarrel, all right? It's not good for him. He returned to the table to wait for breakfast. Why for him? Maybe it'll be a girl. Better than a boy, Boris smirked. There'll be another real man in the family. Everything is ready. Natasha put a plate of scrambled eggs and sausages in front of him. And you? I don't want to. I'll eat at work, she said, running out into the corridor. She realized that she would vomit if she sat down next to him to eat breakfast. Too clearly in her imagination began to draw pictures of a joint and allegedly family future with this man. Natasha was not expecting a call from Igor, and even less did she expect him to say that he had already decided everything and was moving out. We can meet more often, he said, and Natalia almost cried. No, we won't, she said. It seemed that the next words that needed to be said were just stuck in her throat. Igor, there's something you need to know about me. It's important. It changes everything. My sister told me. Igor sounded embarrassed and confident at the same time. It doesn't change anything. I mean, it does. But not in the way you think, Natasha. And I've always wanted children. Oh, Natasha answered the call as she was walking down the office corridor. And now she was almost sliding down the wall. Her legs were weak. Igor, I have a plane in 2 hours. What? Yes, I'm easygoing, he grinned. The apartment will deal with the realtor. I gave him a power of attorney. While everything is done, I'll stay at my sister's. Let's meet tomorrow. Okay, Natasha said, and it seemed to her that with this consent, she had dealt a crushing blow to all her former life, and to the life she had been trying to build lately. Because what about Boris? What about mom and mother-in-law? And that day, when Natasha got home, she thought that maybe she had that look on her face, that her husband would look at her, and everything would become clear to him immediately. But no, Boris didn't seem to guess anything. What if we call it Feeder? Boris spoke up the next day in the morning, when he was going to work. That was my grandfather's name. and there's another named Nikifor. My mom likes it. What do you think? Yeah, let's do it later, Natasha muttered. Why aren't you going to work, by the way? Don't you feel well? No, I'm fine. I'm on my way out too. You go. You don't have to wait for me, or you'll be late, Natasha said, turning away from the window, because now she was sure that her husband would understand everything from the look on her face. Finally, Boris left, and Natasha, oh, she had never felt like this in her life. Things flew into 2 travel bags and another plaid one she had bought it at the supermarket last night on her way home. Didn't have enough? So, just some things can be put into bags and the rest can be picked up later. There was a message from the cab service the car had arrived. Natasha went downstairs and asked the driver to help her with her things, and gave her some cash for it. Welcome to the temporary housewarming party. Oksana greeted her, and helped her get her things into the apartment. You don't look so good, hey, cheer up. Everything's going to be fine. My people don't know yet, Natasha rounded her eyes. I see. Well, we'll have a cup of tea now, and then we'll call and report your escape. I'm a little scared. It's okay. Big girl, you'll manage. What happened in the following days? Oh, Natasha, of course, expected that her relatives would accept her decision with difficulty. But still they surpassed her most frightening assumptions. Her mother shouted, swore, and involved her father, who spoke out, demanded to stop disgracing their family. Boris started it first, Natasha said. Doesn't he disgrace the family? The answer was harsh. Boris's deed could be hidden, but the fact that they were getting a divorce despite the fact that there would be a child was something that could not be hidden. It was very hard for Natasha to communicate with her relatives in such a tone, but inside she felt a storm rising at the mere thought of making at least a little concession, for example, to delay filing for divorce. I on you all the tea sedative transferred, jokingly said Oksana, when once again calmed her friend after a session of communication. Oksana had a 3-room apartment, so there was enough room for everyone. But just a week later Igor rented an apartment and handed the keys to it to Natasha, and at first she thought that of course he wanted them to live together, but he said that she could live there alone if she felt more comfortable. It is the beginning of an affair is one thing, but living together is quite another. We can start living together when I buy an apartment here, Igor said. Choose what's best for you and for our baby. I have not a brother, but a knight, sighed Oksana, who witnessed the whole scene. My mother chased me for love novels and paperbacks, and I always knew that in life should be something like this. No, I won't cry now, I'll cry later. At your wedding? Finally, the divorce was finalized, and something was achieved by talking to Boris. Natasha said that, well, he will be able to see the child sometimes, and yes, the grandmother will also be allowed, but no, all important decisions in the life of her daughter, and enough time has already passed to find out. She will make independently or consulting with her husband. Igor successfully sold his apartment and bought a new one in the city, and got a good job. And at his insistence, Natasha went on maternity leave early because, as Igor said, she still needed a break from all the stress. Natasha gratefully accepted this and many other expressions of care from her husband. And actually, she wanted to postpone the wedding a little bit, as she was not sure how she would look in a wedding dress with a belly. But in the end, Igor convinced her that she would be the most beautiful, and the celebration took place when there were still 2 months left before the birth of the baby girl. And then married life began, and a happy one it was. And when she learned that her ex, Boris, had been cheated out of his money by the very woman he'd been cheating on, Natasha didn't even feel any gloating. She just didn't care what happened to him now.